Thank you, Paul, and I see you've read my book, even if you don't know the name of it, which is First Lady from Plains. First Lady from Plains. And I wrote that a long time ago. It's been a long time since we were in the White House. Well, Joshua, it's great to see you again. I'm excited about your book.
Same here. Thank you for coming.
Great reviews on his book. And he told me that this was like a homecoming because he did a lot of the research right here. And I was impressed with the research. I think it's about a third of your book, isn't it?
It
is
is.
the bibliography. Well, I always wondered how you decided to write on that particular subject, Abraham Lincoln's Depression.
Well, first, let me thank you for coming. The two strands are coming together tonight. My research at the New York Public Library, one of the great libraries in the world, and my relationship with the Carter Center, without which this book would not have happened. It was in early 1998, and the two things that came together for me were a intense intellectual fascination with mental illness and suffering, which I was exploring to some extent as a journalist at the time. I was a political reporter in Washington and was around sort of figures of power and around stories of significance very much outside of myself, and was sort of looking to try and develop this as a beat. At the same time, I was suffering terribly myself from a condition diagnosed as depression and given other diagnoses as well, though the diagnoses never totally fit me. And that and the intellectual fascination together were a reason for me to explore the subject of suffering in my work and to learn about it as it was experienced by other historical and literary figures. I learned something about Lincoln and was just totally amazed, as I think many readers of the book are, that he had such experience and that he was so honest and open about it. And when we live in an age when so many people are so closed and quiet about it, and it turned out it was a great coincidence that there was an opening within the Lincoln world to do some original research, and yet it might not have gone anywhere had I not gotten a fellowship from the Carter Center, a fellowship in mental health journalism, to pursue the original research, because it took me a very long time to just get my feet wet. And perhaps it's a good segue for you to talk about the fellowship and your end of this project.
Well, I've worked on mental health issues for over 30 years, a long time. And it did start that way. Jimmy was campaigning for governor, and he appointed a commission. We had a governor's commission on mental health, and then I had a president's commission on mental health, and now I have a really, really good program at the Carter Center. And we've worked on stigma. I've worked on stigma all of those years to try to overcome stigma. Also on policy issues, because we have an annual symposium on mental health policy at the Carter Center. But we were brainstorming one day, trying to decide what else we could do to educate people about mental illnesses and try to overcome the stigma, because I've always thought that if we could overcome stigma, that everything else would fall in place. Because today people don't want to admit they have mental illness, so many don't and don't go for help. Funding is what's left over after all other health programs are funded. Well, somebody came up with the idea of fellowships for journalists, because the media has such an impact on people's opinions about mental illness and about people who have mental illnesses. And we thought that if we could develop a cadre of journalists who knew about mental illnesses, who knew the facts, could report accurately when things happen, and maybe have some influence on their fellow journalists, that maybe it would help overcome stigma. It has been one of the most successful programs we've ever had. We've been so excited from the very beginning about the status of those who apply. Joshua, we've had 8 classes. That's 8 years. Every year we have a new class. And you were the second class. We have 6 journalists from our country. This year we had 110 applications for 6 places. We get the cream of the crop. We even have turned down Pulitzer Prize winners. But we did that because when one applied, we had just done a study on the subject. They apply with a subject. They get a stipend. They come to the Carter Center in September, Carter Center is a partner with Emory University, so our year runs from September to September like Emory's does. So they come in September and talk about what they're going to do, and then they come back at the next September and report on their project. And we've had more newspaper articles, radio programs, a lot of applications from NPR and National Radio and television. Our fellows have done 2 documentaries. We've had 3 books. Joshua's is a new one right now. It's just been a great program, and we're excited about it. And another thing is that each fellow has an advisor, and we have one thing that's good about Jimmy having been president is we can call on the top people in any field, and they will help. And we've got, who was your advisor?
Kay Redfield Jameson.
Kay Redfield Jameson. She's just an absolutely wonderful person, and you were lucky to get her. Well, all of ours are good, though. That's how I became familiar with Josh. And I was so excited when he said that his subject was going to be the Depression of Abraham Lincoln, because I had always heard that Mary Todd Lincoln had suffered from depression, but I had never known that Abraham Lincoln suffered from depression. So you've taught me a lot.
Same here.
Mm-hmm. Well, how did it affect you personally, knowing that you had depression? And I think you wrote this book better than anybody else could, because little nuances and things that you could tell because you had suffered from the same thing, I think just made your book so good.
Thank you. I did end up learning a lot from Lincoln's story, although the biggest impact is probably the original impact, which is just knowing that it existed, that he suffered as he did, and that he spoke about it so forcefully and clearly, and he insisted on getting the help he needed, and building the skills that he needed to live a good life. And that originally the fact that it led him to do such magnificent work was of much less concern to me than the fact that it happened in the first place, because I think a lot of people who suffer from depression feel radically alone, like you're the only person in the world. And in fact, Lincoln, as a young man, wrote, "I am now the most miserable man living," in this letter that is really beautifully articulates this feeling of isolation. And so that feeling of connection with another person was very powerful to me. And then over the course of my research, seeing the movement of his life, seeing the way that he passed through these very profoundly important stages, helped me understand that depression is more than just a diagnosis. It's more than just something that can be written on a doctor's chart. It's more than just a moment in time, but a story that evolves over the course of experience. And this is the way that I organized the book, which is coming out of Lincoln's story. I didn't find any modern psychological theory that could account for its complexity. I had to turn to the story first and then make sense of it. And briefly, for those who haven't read the book, I'll briefly lay out these 3 main elements. The first is a stage that I refer to as fear, from the classic definition of melancholy, fear and sadness without known cause. And this was the stage when Lincoln was a young man. He had 2 profound breakdowns and was suicidal. And he really insisted on acknowledging his experience to everyone around him, often to the significant fear of his friends and colleagues. The second stage was a period in Lincoln's middle years of dogged diligence in developing a series of strategies to cope and survive in the face of his suffering, which he acknowledged really clearly was something that was just part of his constitution that he was going to live with forever. And then finally, the insight from this first stage, in the sense of awareness of the self and the suffering self, combined with the discipline that he had developed over his middle years, came together with this sense of piercing insight and creativity and humility, and informed the great work he did as an anti-slavery orator and then as president.
Well, the reason I'm so excited about it is because don't you think it'll have a great impact on stigma if people know that Abraham Lincoln suffered from severe depression and was a great president? It seems to me that that would make it okay for anybody to feel like it's okay to admit that they had depression. And I think it's going to help. Hopefully it's going to help with Congress.